Hello, and thank you everyone for coming today. We have an interesting presentation today from Laura Jones with St. Mark's Hospital. She's going to be talking about triathlons and the basics of doing a triathlon. I will let Laura introduce herself at the very beginning of her talk. Keep an eye on the chat. I will be posting the link for your healthy lifestyle points. So you'll want to go ahead and click on that link and sign in at some point during the presentation today. Go ahead, Laura, why don't you get us started?
Right. Well, I'm excited to be here. I have to say that triathlons, I have a lot of fond memories of triathlons, and it just really has become my favorite thing to participate in. So I'm excited to share some of my experiences and tips for triathlons. I am a registered nurse. I have a national certification in education and also professional development, and have been a registered nurse for about 30 years. Is kind of my experience. So we'll go ahead and get started. We have a lot of stuff to get through. All right, here's my disclaimer that this is for educational purposes only, that it does not replace a physician or sports medicine assessment, and I have no conflicts of interest. All right, we're going to discuss triathlon history briefly and some important basic elements. We're going to talk about different factors that will impact your performance. We'll go over what race day looks like and look at rules and regulations. And then finally, I'll review a few tips and resources that will help you be successful. So let's go over the basics. The American College of Sports Medicine has created this list to help determine if you should see a physician before training for a triathlon. Some important conditions include those who have had a previous heart condition, those who are taking blood pressure medication or heart medication, those that have pain in their chest with any kind of physical activity or when you're climbing stairs. If you've ever been told that you have a significant heart murmur, if you've had any chest pain while resting in the last 30 days, also if you have a history of dizziness or loss of consciousness, difficulty breathing while exercising, those who have had some sort of joint or bone problem that could potentially be made worse by swimming or running. So for example, like if you've had a total shoulder or your knee, had some surgery on a knee or a hip, you would see your physician just to make sure that everything will be okay. And of course, anyone who's over the age of 40 who hasn't had a physical in the last year, that just assures that your blood work and all of your vital signs are looking good and you can physically handle the intensity of exercise. I'm a bit of a history lover, so I wanted to kind of briefly go over how triathlons came to be. I think it's very interesting. In the mid-1970s, swimming, biking, and running were all kind of popular pastimes in Southern California. And a bunch of friends got together and started kind of arguing about which one was better. And they thought, well, let's put them all together. And so in 1975, the first triathlon was put on in San Diego, and it consisted of like 5 miles of running, 5 miles of bike, and swimming a half a mile. A few years later, some friends in Hawaii were kind of doing the same thing, arguing who's the better athlete. And eventually, they were able to combine what was already happening. There was already kind of a rough water race that was 2.4 miles. There was a bike race already occurring in Hawaii that was 112 miles. And then the Honolulu Marathon, which was the traditional 26.2 miles. And so they decided to combine those. And that became the first Ironman triathlon. It had 15 participants and 12 of those finished. And really the the Hawaii Ironman is really the most coveted spot in regards to triathlons, and about 2,000 people will participate in that every single year. The Olympics actually didn't put triathlons into the Olympic Games until 2000, and they actually came up with a different distance, and I will talk about that right now. So there's generally 4 different triathlon distances. There's the sprint, which you swim for a half a mile, you bike for 12, run for 3, and for a total of 16 miles. The Olympic distance, and that's the one that the International Olympic Committee came up with, is a swim that's just short of a mile, a 25-mile bike, and a 6.2-mile run, for a total of 31.9 miles. And the half, which is 1.2 mile swim, 56-mile bike, and a 13.1 mile run. And then the full is like the Hawaii Ironman, which is the 2.4 mile swim, the 112-mile bike, and the marathon, for a total of 140.6 miles. There are other options that kind of fall in or are closely related to triathlons, like the aqua bike, which is a swim and bike, the duathlon, run, bike, run, the aqualathon, which is swim and run. They also offer off-road triathlons, where instead of road biking and running on asphalt, you do mountain biking and trail running. And then finally, a lot of triathlons include a relay option, where you can team up into groups of 2 or 3. And the picture on the left actually is my very first triathlon that I participated in was a relay. And I had a group that wanted, or, some friends that wanted me to do the bike portion. And so that's what I did. And that's really what got me involved in triathlons. So some of the reasons why you may want to, quote unquote, try out a triathlon. Maybe single sports are monotonous to you. Depending on whether your primary sport is biking, running, or swimming, cross training will challenge you and ultimately make you a better athlete. I don't necessarily recommend, if you've never run and never biked and never done any swimming, to jump right into triathlons. Usually people will have at least one sport that they've done before. One of the most amazing reasons you should participate in triathlons is you kind of become a part of an amazing community. There's a big camaraderie, there's friendship and encouragement. Even the professional triathletes are really supportive and motivating. You can expect that they're going to cheer you on. There's going to be lots of high fives, and there is no friendlier sport. The Olympic and longer distance triathlons are typically a weekend event that may include travel. There's great destinations that you can go to. They are very carnival-like and family-friendly. Me and my husband competed in this St. George half a few years ago, and took our entire family, and they had an event the night before, and they could participate in a 1K and 5K run, and they really enjoyed it. Another reason is that you may love a challenge. Give it all you got in not 1, not 2, but 3 sports back to back. And really that sense of accomplishment is really unparalleled. And finally, bragging rights. Competing in a triathlon is no small feat. Some will think you're hardcore, and others are going to be amazed. Finishing a triathlon really puts you in the awesome category. All right, I'd like to dispel some myths about triathlons. One of the myths is that you have to be an athlete to participate in triathlons, and I definitely think that you need to have participated in at least one of the sports, but there's really few people who do triathlons professionally or to win. Most people you see are just like you. They have jobs and families and responsibilities. They come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Triathlons are a participation sport, and we can definitely take part. Some people think that you have to swim, bike, and run every single day, and that's just not true. They kind of space it out. You know, you may do a run one day, and then maybe you do a swim, bike another day. So we'll talk a little bit more about training a little bit later. Another myth is that open water swimming is dangerous. Now, is open water riskier than swimming in a pool? Yeah, it is, but there are some things that you can do that makes it significantly safer, and we'll talk about that later as well. Another thing that I've heard is that you're not a real, quote unquote, real triathlete if you haven't raced a full Ironman. And, you know, there's kind of a sense that unless you do an ultra distance event, you really aren't a triathlete or haven't done a triathlon. The fact that the Olympics and the World Cup competition is done at an Olympic distance is just proof to me that that's just not true. And then finally, the myth that you need expensive gear to participate, and that's just not true either. I borrowed a bike, I used what I had, and then as I went along, I gathered more and more equipment to just make it more convenient rather than absolutely having it be a necessity. I believe that anyone can fit a triathlon in their schedule. Olympic is kind of my distance of choice, and I've trained while working full-time and juggling a husband and 7 children. So I think that you can too. We'll talk about time elements in a few minutes, but here's kind of the commitment level that you would need based off of the distances. So a sprint, you would expect that you would need to train 5 hours a week for 12 weeks. An Olympic, you would need to train 7 hours a week for 12 weeks, a half 10 hours a week for 22 weeks, and a full 12 hours a week for 30 weeks. And really you should choose the distance if you're interested in doing a triathlon that's based off of the time commitment that you can give it, or on the length of time or on the length of time before the event. If you're going to participate in a triathlon, you need to commit to workout, sleep, and nutrition. Exercise really becomes a focal point of your day, and you should follow a training program and sign up for an event and then stick to that training program. It is important, though, not to ever cut back on sleep to train. You should never underestimate the importance of sleep. It's really just as important as your workouts, because when you sleep, your body mends itself. That's when it grows stronger. If you are cutting sleep short, then it takes you longer to recover. It reduces your energy, and it actually increases your risk for injury and illness and mental burnout. So instead of cutting back on sleep, look for time wasters in your life instead. So, and then replace those with exercise. So how long do you watch TV? How many hours in a week? How about surfing the internet and watching YouTube videos? A lot of times those are some big time wasters. I did want to mention that triathlon training is kind of training your character to do the work even when you don't feel like it. Because really that feeling of success at the end is amazing. When I was having a bad day and maybe didn't want to go for a run, running is probably my least favorite out of all three. For example, I would kind of visualize, if I didn't want to go for a run, I'd visualize me going through the finish line. And that really helped me stay motivated. If you commit to nutrition, you can be assured that your body will be able to handle the challenges you're giving it in your training. As a general rule for regular eating, You should focus on eating fruits, vegetables, and lean proteins and healthy fats during the day. I recommend eating every about 2.5 to 3 hours to kind of keep your blood sugar stable and avoid excessive hunger because you'll burn through a lot more calories as you're training. We should also spend a little time talking about the food options that you use before and during your training. The picture in the upper right hand side is a picture of what's called goo. And this is a gel that's considered quote unquote fuel for your body while you're training. It's a honey-like consistency. It comes in lots of different flavors. You basically tear the top off and squeeze it into your mouth is how you'll get this into your body. The goo gels are my favorite, and they really have a combination of a right combination of carbohydrates, protein, fat, and electrolytes, and are really convenient. You should definitely take them with about 8 ounces of water when you take them. There are things called bars and blocks that do the same thing, but those take a little bit longer to digest. So that's one of the reasons why I like the gels. So how do you fuel your body before you start exercising? Really, if you have 2 hours prior and you're, not doing your exercise first thing in the morning, a meal that includes about 400 calories of grain and fruit is the best. But maybe if you exercise after you first wake up, then you would only drink water. And then about 10 minutes before you begin whichever sports you're doing that particular day, you would take a goo gel. You also need to kind of fuel, quote unquote, again, I'm going to use that word a lot, your body during your training. Your body utilizes carbohydrate or glycogen stores. Sorry. I'm not sure what happened. I've got to pause here for a minute. And plug my computer in. I apologize. Here, I thought it was fully charged. All right, we're back to normal. I apologize. All right, you need to fuel your body during your training because your glycogen stores or your carbohydrate stores are depleted while you are exercising. So your body generally will use more carbohydrates, and because of that, it's important for you to take that fuel during exercise, and hence why I was talking about the goo gels. If you're working out less than an hour, then you drink only water. It's only for the workouts that last more than an hour that you need to include not only water, but also electrolytes and that fuel. Water intake is really highly variable based on a lot of factors, but the general rule is to take 2 or 3 large mouthfuls about every 20 to 30 minutes. If you're not taking enough water in, then your performance actually is drastically affected. And then if you're exercising more than an hour, also you'll need to take in electrolytes, and you can do that through like the Powerade in the pitcher. You can do that with electrolyte powders. You can do that with electrolyte pills. Also, the goo gel includes electrolytes. So you're basically, what I'm trying to tell you is that your fueling during is really individual. And as you are training, you need to find out what works best for you. And really, it's best practice that you do the nutrition that you're going to be doing throughout training that you're going to plan on using during race day. And then finally, fueling after your exercise. You need a little water, you need a little carbohydrates and protein. And it's very important that you give your body this within 30 minutes of completion of your training for that particular day. All right, we're going to spend some time talking about the different portions of the race. Swimming is all about technique. So if you do not have the experience with swimming, I don't recommend that you do it on your own. I would definitely recommend you joining what's called a master's swim program. And that really, even though it says master's swim program, it's all levels. And they meet at specific times, like in the morning or the evening. And there's actually a coach that will give you feedback on how to improve your swimming technique. And swimming really is all about technique. And it's sometimes hard to wrap your head around and get it right. This picture kind of shows you putting everything together, you know, keeping your body flat, reaching with your arm, pulling back, and as your body kind of rolls side to side, and then getting back into the water quickly. One of the biggest tips that I can give you about swimming and triathlons is that it's not about how fast you move your arms. Okay, that's called stroke rate. The distance that you go actually is better based off of what's called stroke length. And so as you stroke, if you pause a little bit before you start your other stroke, you'll actually do something that's called gliding. And so you want to glide rather than swim, because you'll actually go for farther for less effort. Open water swimming is a different experience. There's no confining lanes or chemicals. It's kind of unique and adventurous. The water's not clear unless you're swimming in the ocean. It is a little higher risky, so it's important to not swim on your own ever. Wear a wetsuit, which makes you more buoyant, and always wear a bright colored hat. And swim in designated swimming areas, like in a reservoir. If you're kind of worried about open water, there's lots of local events that will have sprint and sometimes Olympic distances that are actually conducted in the pool that will eliminate open water altogether. As I mentioned before, wearing a brightly colored hat and wetsuit are important measures to keep you safe in open water. The silicone hat makes you, the bright color will make you more visible to motorcraft. The wetsuit makes you buoyant. It also keeps you warmer because it gives you a layer of insulation. I definitely recommend buying a wetsuit in person. My first time I purchased it online thinking I was going to save a little bit of money, and I ended up purchasing like 3 before I got my right size. So definitely in person is the best bet. Another thing that you might need for open water swimming is something called an anti-chafe stick. It's kind of like a deodorant stick that sometimes your wetsuit will like rub in a particular area. And so you just put the stick, you know, rub some of the stick on that particular area so that you don't kind of get these deep abrasions. Tinted goggles are a great idea. It helps kind of block the sun and help you see more clearly. And something called sighting is really important to learn. When you're in the pool, you have the lines on the bottom that helps you kind of keep swimming straight. But open water swimming, you'll actually have a tendency to swim in circles unless you're sighting. And what sighting is that you look in the distance and you find a point like a tree or a large rock, and you swim towards that that area. But about every, 7 to 10 strokes, you need to come up and look and find that item again, because you'll find that you're kind of veering to the left or veering to the right. There's also something called swim waves, and that's based on gender, age, or speed. You'll kind of start the swim with a group of people with your own starting horn, and that's really to space out athletes on the course. All right. Biking tips, make sure that you're riding a bike that's your right size and that it fits your body. The calculation for the road bike is to measure your inseam, which is from your groin down to the floor in centimeters, and then times that by 0.67. And that number is your bike size number. I definitely recommend doing a bike fitting. If a bike shop does a bike fitting, they'll actually measure you all over and make sure that your bike is fitting you perfectly, and that can really help you be more comfortable. There's something called aero bars, and this picture is a picture of my husband who did the Ironman in Arizona. And if you can kind of see, his hands are kind of close together, and they're not like hanging on to the traditional handlebars. Those are aero bars, and the hands hold on to the bars, and then the elbows rest on kind of a padding. And that just gives you another option for your hands and changing your position with your bike, because sitting on a bike for, 54 miles, 112 miles is a long time. Make sure that you know how to maintain your bike and change a tire. If you don't, make sure someone helps you or watch a video and then practice it. Change your hand position often. I mentioned that earlier. I actually had 3 favorites. I had 2 different places on the handlebars that the traditional handlebars that I'd put my hands, and then the aero bars were my 3rd option. The reason you want to change your hand position is because your hands from holding on to the handlebars will actually start to go a little bit numb. So that's definitely something that you want to do. And then the last thing is bike in the race conditions. If you are training for a triathlon that happens in July in Utah, you want to train in the heat so that you are prepared for that. If your triathlon is very hilly, like it was in St. George when we did the St. George half Ironman, you need to train on hills. And I also trained in the rain because you never know what race day is going to give you. Here's some of my tips that I offer for the running portion. You can try the run walk method. This is what helped me learn to run. I had already been swimming, I'd already been running or biking, but I hadn't really loved running. And so I used the run walk method, which basically there was a gentleman named Jeff Galloway, who is a former Olympic and competitive runner, who came up with this. It's kind of less grueling and reduces your risk of injury. So basically you increase more minutes of running and less walking. So you run for a period of time, then you walk for a period of time, and then you run for a period of time, and you keep doing that. So when I was first running, I would run for a mile, and then I would walk for 1/10 of a mile, and then I would run for a mile and then walk for 1/10 of a mile. It just kind of helps your body kind of recover a little bit. Another thing I recommend is purchasing your shoes at a running shop. They can determine your gait and give you a good idea on what a good running shoe is. So depending whether your arches are flat or your arch is or if you have high arches, or maybe your toes point in or point out, they can really help guide you rather than going to a box store and purchasing a pair of shoes and then having knee pain. Shoes actually should be replaced every 300 miles. So I encourage people to buy 2 pairs. That way you don't end up running the event with shoes that are not going to support and cushion. And then the last thing is those speed laces. Speed laces will just give you some time because you don't have to tie your shoes. It's like an elastic bungee. that makes putting on shoes very quickly. And then for the event, there are stations every mile on the running portion and about every 5 miles on the bike portion. Take advantage of those stations. They will have hydration. They're going to have the carbohydrates that you need. So don't bypass those. There's something called transitions that are the time and areas between the swim and bike and then the bike and run. So T1 or transition 1 is the transition between swimming and then going to the biking. And this is kind of where you stage your equipment. And so the biggest thing I want to tell you is that you need a plan. And so here on the slide, you can see what was my plan. And I practiced it over and over again so that I would get fast in doing these and changing from swimming to biking. And then again, transition 2 is the portion where you go from your bike to your run, and just have a plan and then practice that plan. You just need to find what is your most efficient way. Time in transition actually counts against your final time. So you just want to be efficient as possible. Another tip in transitions that I would give you is when you set up your bike before the race, make sure that you're setting it up in a place that's you're going to remember. You know, maybe by a tree, or they a lot of times will number the different areas that have the bikes, and so maybe use your favorite number. It's just really important that you not get lost in this sea of bikes. You can also lay out the items, your changing items around your bike if you wish. And also transition 1 and transition 2, sometimes they're in the same place and other times they're not. So if they're not in the same place, it's just really important that you have what you need for the bike in transition 1 and have what you need for the run in transition 2, because if you mistakenly leave your helmet in transition 2, you're not going to be continuing on the race. All right, some important factors. I highly recommend utilizing a heart monitor while training. This will help you not exert too much or too little and truly manage that pace. That's important because you're going for a long period of time, and that's why it's kind of all about pacing. Triathlons are done at an aerobic pace, so kind of the zone 2 area. If you get more anaerobic, then you'll actually deplete your energy stores and you may not be able to finish. You calculate your zones by 220 minus your age. And so like an example would be if you're 35, 220 minus 35 is 185. And so then you do the percentages based off of that number. All right, get rid of the notion of no pain and no gain and listen to your body. Work with your body, not against it. Depending on your athletic ability, you have to teach and allow your body to adapt to the demands that you're asking of it. One of the things that people don't know is that your joints and your tendons actually take longer to adapt than your muscles. So a lot of people will feel good and feel like that they can go faster. And then their joints and tendons are going to tell them so, because then they've developed tendonitis or shin splints, because your joints and tendons need to be able to catch up to your muscles. So there's something called gradual adaptation when you kind of slowly increase your duration and additionally increase intensity. You do it at different times with the intensity, so your body's kind of surprised. But the key to gradual adaptation is that you would never, ever increase more duration or intensity more than 10% at any given time. So you don't want to like run a mile and then the next week run 2 miles. That's doubling your distance, okay? So really the research shows that if you are increasing more than 10%, your body will not be able to adapt and you risk injury. All right, what to expect. You can kind of expect to do kind of the following each week here on the left-hand side. You know, 1 to 2 short runs, 1 to 2 short bikes, a longer run, a longer bike, 2 to 3 swim sessions, and having 1 day off. So the picture kind of on the right-hand side is an example of what you would expect for like an Olympic distance. And every training program is a little bit different. I'll tell you which ones I recommend at the very end. And really, you just don't want more than 3 days in between, like your bike. You don't want 3 days to go in between, so it gets kind of complicated. And you also don't want to have 2 intense workouts back to back. So I definitely encourage you to do a training program and stick to that training program. You should always warm up and cool down before exercise. You can actually warm up by doing that selected sport at a lower, like zone 1 level for about 5 minutes before you start your normal workout. You kind of cool down in the same manner, but also add stretching of whatever muscles that you utilized. If you have some muscle soreness, that actually can be alleviated by self-massage. The picture on the left is an example of a self-massage tool that you can utilize to kind of rub those different areas that may be sore. But also you can try an Epsom salt soak, hot bath. That really is kind of an old age way to alleviate muscle soreness as well. So how do you find the time? How do you find the time? The best advice I can give you is to train in time and not necessarily miles. If you train in miles, a lot of times your estimates are going to be off and it's going to be difficult to calendar. So really, like on a run, you would run. So if you have to do like a 60-minute run, you're going to run 30 minutes one way and then come back 30 minutes. Make sure you set your goals, decide what you want to accomplish, how many days, how long. Put those goals into action by actually putting it in your calendar so it becomes part of your day. Make sure you prepare by planning ahead, laying out your clothes or your equipment. Biking especially takes a lot of time to prepare, so just be aware of that. Indoor training can really help manage your time better because you get rid of the drive time. But you should also train outside because you really need that real feel of what it's going to be on that day. You can also utilize lunchtime training if maybe a fitness facility is on site or close. If that's actually earlier in the day, so a lot of times your energy is higher than like if it was after work. And then earlier bird workouts, things come up later in the day. So you risk kind of losing a workout that way. So even on weekends, doing it first thing in the morning is the best thing. Missing a workout should be a rare occurrence rather than a common one because consistency is the key to the success with triathlons. But you also don't want to train if you're ill. Health should come before fitness. And you'll actually aggravate and prolong your illness if you're trying to work out during an illness. So if you miss 1 day, go ahead and skip it and then just, you know, join your training program right where, don't try to make up the day, I guess is what I'm saying. If you miss 2 to 3 days, skip your lost days, but then the first day back, only do half the scheduled training and then resume after that. If you miss 4 to 6 days, The first day you're back, do a third of the training. The second day back, again, the third of the training, and then 2/3 of the training on the next 2 days. And then 7 days or more, reconsider timing because you've really started deconditioning. All right, you spent some hours and hours of preparation and training, and your big day has arrived. All right, race day equipment. Here's kind of a list of equipment you need for race day. And I'm not going to go over these in detail, but probably the biggest thing is knowing what you're going to be wearing for the swim. I recommend that you wear, like for men, just wear a spandex bottom and then your wetsuit over the top, and then you can add your shirt, your top in transition 1. For women, again, spandex on the bottom, doing a sports bra on the top, and then your wetsuit, and then add your items in transition 1. Make sure that you're carrying plenty of water and energy gels on your bike so that you have what you need. Same with the energy gels on the transition 2 and your running shoes. And dry socks is always a great idea for transition 2 as well. All right, typically triathlons that are longer than a sprint are a weekend affair, I mentioned. You check in on Friday and the race isn't until Saturday or Sunday. I always recommend, if that's an option, to check in the day before because it's going to alleviate some stress on you. There may be events or fun activities, but make sure you participate in moderation because you don't want to be on your feet all day and then expect your feet to have to withstand your race the next day. It's also important that you don't get tempted to train in the days before the event. Your body needs to rejuvenate itself. You also don't want to get sunburned. Then you're going to be not happy on race day. So check in, receive your number, your swim cap, your stickers. They'll give you a timing chip that's either on your number or is like an ankle strap that's going to track your time. After checking in, you organize your race gear. You'll pump up your bike tires, set up to transition 1. It's always a great idea to practice the run from the swim to your bike, then from your bike to the exit. So you're kind of familiarizing yourself on the in and the out on both transitions. Eat an early dinner, don't overeat. Organize your remaining gear and food for race morning, and then make sure you go to bed early. On race day, just like normally, you should eat a 400-calorie breakfast at least 2 hours prior to the race. Make sure you dress warm. Race mornings are cool. Arrive at least an hour early. They'll actually mark your body. Most races mark your body and put numbers on you, your race number and your age. Stay focused. And then between breakfast and race time, you can kind of sip and finish 2 energy drinks. That'll help you stay hydrated. And then 10 minutes before a swim, just like I recommended earlier, just take a GU energy gel to make sure that you're fully raring to go. For your bike and run, your heart rate should be about in the zone 2 range, just like it was with training. Fuel with the GU every 15 to 30 minutes. Drink from the energy drink every, sip often. And then use every aid station. Once you've crossed the finish line, you're done, and it's time to celebrate your significant accomplishment. All right, the triathlon rules are no communication devices of any type during competition. So you can't have your cell phone on you. You also shouldn't, most triathlons will not allow music or earphones or headphones because you've got to stay aware. They absolutely require helmets. They will not let you race without them. And you must wear the swim cap provided by the race. This picture is a picture of me before an event, and they gave me a bright orange swim cap, and everybody else had a bright orange swim cap. Another thing that's not allowed is what's called drafting. There's a drafting zone that on the bike portion that you should allow 3 bike lengths from the bike in front of you. And if you are going faster, move to the left and you have 15 seconds to bypass them. And then the other rule is not blocking, which means you should be riding on the right so people can pass on the left. And then wearing a wetsuit. If the water is 78 degrees or lower, then that's going to be allowed, and definitely for safety, I would recommend that. All right, finally, we're going to review some tips and resources, and then I'll give a little time for some questions. The golden rule is never to do anything in the race that you haven't done several times in practice. So do some open water practice. Practice the transitions, like I mentioned. Practice going from the bike to the run. Another thing is reading the athlete guide. Every race has one, and really it's your responsibility to understand the schedule and events and the rules. I also recommend going to the athlete meeting. It's really a great way to get a feel for the course and anything that maybe would surprise you on race day. And you can ask questions. And then get familiar, I mentioned. Go from the swim out to transition 1, from the bike out, bike in to transition 2, and then out to the run so that you know where you're supposed to be going. Triathlon tips. You need to commit if you're going to be successful. One of the biggest obstacles is your own mind and making excuses, telling yourself that you can't do it. So overcoming those mental challenges is important. To maintain motivation, make sure that you remind yourself why you're doing it. Write it down, revisit it if you don't want to train it. It's important to get support of your family or friends. And if you don't have family and friends that are supportive, then you can join a club or find a training partner. Your only goal really for your first triathlon is just to finish with a smile on your face. Your time doesn't necessarily matter. And then finally, here's some resources. USA Triathlon is the body that, the accrediting body that looks over triathlons. You can go to this website and find a race club or coach. You can find the official rules. You can find some online forums. TriFind is, you're able to find a race by state. So instead of searching through a whole bunch, you can just narrow it down by a state, or you can narrow it down by distance or other categories. Say you want a women's only triathlon or an off-road triathlon. Time to Try is personalized training plans based on experience and events. They also have articles and resources there. And then the 2 training books that I recommend, and they're pretty cheap, they're under $10, I believe. Triathlon for Beginners by Dan Goldie and Your First Triathlon by Joe Frail. And here are my references. I'm happy to take questions.
We do have a few questions.
Okay.
The first one is, I'm surprised at the recommendation for 2 energy drinks. Doesn't all that caffeine add stress to the heart?
Well, energy drinks, I shouldn't say energy drinks, it's sports drinks. If I said energy drinks, I apologize. We are not taking caffeine in on the triathlons. What they've shown, actually, the research shows with caffeine is that it improves temporarily your performance, but then you kind of crash. So no caffeine intake during triathlon training or during the race when it's the energy drinks, or not the energy drinks, sports drinks. I keep saying energy drinks. Sports drinks. So like Gatorade, Powerade, those are meant to replace your electrolytes, not give you caffeine. So
I think that's an important clarification. So thank you to whoever asked that question. Another question was, do people usually aim for time or just to finish?
So typically I recommend for the first few triathlons that you do that you just shoot for finishing, because that's an accomplishment in itself. Once you start becoming more familiar and are more comfortable, and if you're feeling like you want to, run for time, you certainly can. And that's when like those time savers really kind of come into play. And make goals. Like I did a half, and my goal was to finish within 3 hours or less. And so that was definitely one of my, I think that was my fourth or fifth triathlon. And so set your goals and go from there. But really, I think the fun is just finishing.
Do most of the participants finish? And if so, what is the approximate percentage of people
You're
who
breaking up a
finish?
little bit. Repeat that question. Sorry.
Do most of the participants finish? And what is the approximate percentage of people that finish?
I got that. Do most people finish? And the answer to that is the shorter distances, absolutely. The longer distances, like the halves and the full Ironman, I actually don't know the statistics of percentages wise, but there's just more time for things to come up. You can get injured, you can crump, you can have lots of problems. So not everyone finishes on the longer distances. What was the second part of that?
What were the percentages that you already addressed that?
Okay.
Another question is, do triathlons ever get canceled from bad weather, or does the event still go on even in a storm?
Events, triathlons, and actually marathons, I've never seen one canceled. The only time I've ever seen them canceled was the COVID. That's the only time those were ever canceled. Normally, like I've run them in early spring where it was snowing. I've run them in the rain. So not generally. I've never seen them canceled.
Question is, do they ever do them in a different order?
No, nope. The triathlons are always done in this order. Well, maybe I should say sometimes like small little local events or like a local recreational center, they may do it in a different order, but they're not sanctioned by the USA Triathlon. But anything sanctioned by USA Triathlon is always done in the exact same order.
And then the last question we have is, do you ever get to have a support team?
Not necessarily a support team, but you can create your own support team because they publish the route well in advance and let you know where it is. So, so for example, when I would run them, I would have different support people along the way that would really be giving me cheers and encourage me to go. But they could have like, supplies. So if you've got like a blister, they have like a first aid kit that they can provide some support. There's no, there's not, except for like in the Ironman distance, I don't think they allow that outside support, like giving support. But in most triathlons, if they gave you like a Band-Aid on the way, or if maybe you were running short of supplies and they provided you some extra goos, then that would be perfectly acceptable. In fact, that's one of the fun things about the triathlons is the support people that are along the way and the people that are cheering you on.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. That's all the questions we had for today. I thought this was really interesting. I've never done a triathlon, but it's really interesting to learn more about it. So thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Sadie has put the link for Healthy Lifestyle Points in the chat. So feel free to do that if you haven't done it yet. I'm going to stop the recording and give you a few minutes to hit that link, but thank you all for coming. Goodbye.